since I put up a video, and I, ran out of track tapes. I put up a couple of those Lorraine videos, and I just thought it'd be time to take a minute and give a couple words of thanks and appreciation out to a few people. First, my buddy Jeff Marvin gave me that box of tapes. It was a big collection. It wasn't just my tapes. A lot of the homemade ones from the early 90s, I think, were probably my wife taping, maybe sometimes Craig Marvin's wife taping. But the track tapes were just a conglomeration of a whole bunch of us that bought tapes through the years. For instance, whatever night it was that I think it was middle of June in '92, Dave Clark won his first feature. I had 3 copies of that tape. So it wasn't just all me buying tapes back when I raced. It was all of us did it, and we used to get together and watch them and debrief after the races, refreshing ourselves, and brought back a lot of memories of how the catchphrase of the day was always rewind. But I'd like to thank Jeff for digging those tapes out. He had this big box that we all kind of had them collected in, and he finally got it out so that I could, and I finally got a VCR working, and we, as well as everybody else who contributed to those tapes, because I know that they weren't just all his and mine, but I like, thank him, and I like to thank Uncle Joe for the last 6 tapes that were from Painesville were his. I'm sure he has some more that I'll probably pick up sometime in the near future, depending on how things go. But I thank him. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. He's one of the first guys that when I started racing figure 8 that, was like, you'd go, uh-oh. And I say this fondly, I can still remember maybe my first figure 8. I wondered how he could drive the car, because I swear both of his hands were out the window, the passenger window, telling me how I was number 1. And as he went on by, it was a pleasure for all those years to get to race with all them fellas, in those tapes. But I appreciate, like I said, he's been a friend of mine. It brought my heart great joy the day that he told me he had accepted Christ as his Savior, and he'll always be a friend of mine as far as I'm concerned. I know there's others of you that maybe don't get along with them as well, or maybe you have your opinions and I have mine, but he's always been good to me, and even when he wasn't, I don't care. I always forgive and forget as far as that stupid racetrack goes. But I thank him for those last 6, and I'm sure like I said, we'll get some more. And tonight, I just picked up another big box, and as I was bringing them back, I got them from my old neighbor from 1978, Chad Tikovic. I believe he was 3. I don't know, whatever age he was riding a tricycle or something, wasn't riding a bicycle like the rest of us. He was just a little kid, and we were all, me and Jeff and Marvin and the people that we all hung around with. We grew up in Grand River. We were all about 12. So that was our first time, going to the racetrack was in 1978. And but Chad, oddly enough, however he came into starting the race, I guess he was just dumb enough to follow in our stupid footsteps. And I love you, Chad. I don't mean no harm by what I just said, but you got to have something a little wrong with you just to race. And then to race figure 8, you really got to have a few other things wrong. But we've always enjoyed what we did back then. And And it was a pleasure. You know, as I went out, was driving home with this big box of tapes. They're in an Amazon box, and I was gonna make this video like, I just got this Amazon delivery, and, you know, fake something out there. But you know, I wanted this to be sincere. I've had a lot of feedback, you know, and I didn't put these tapes on a YouTube channel to get a pat on the back or you know, for any recognition. I put them on there because I like watching them, and I hate VHS. It's so hard to rewind and fast forward, and you know, the technology today is so much better than it was back then. And so, you know, for my own use, it's just a lot easier to go to YouTube and put one on and watch. And there's some other great channels. I think Night at the Races has a lot of good stuff, and there might even be better quality than what I do. I just use my phone and videotape off of a TV. I don't know. You know, I probably could figure it out, but I'm not going to. I don't care that much. You know, I like to watch the races as they're, you know, I'm watching them on the TV. I like to watch and 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 remember what happened. You know, and so there's so many of those races. That if you're in the race, you don't see what happened. And if you're in the race before, you didn't see what happened. And, you know, you heard about it. And maybe I probably did see it on the tape. But there's a lot of the trophy stock races and sports and races that I didn't catch. Because when we got the tapes, we usually fast forwarded through that stuff. None of us raced that stuff, so we raced figure eight. So we watched what we wanted to watch and didn't really care about the rest of the tape. But it's been a pleasure to watch all those guys, all those legendary guys, you know. Breaks my heart when I see how many of them are here anymore. You know, Danny Fultz and Bobby Walker and Timmy Pierce. And I mean, the list is so long, and I'm not doing any of the rest of them justice by leaving them out. There's just so many of us that raced down there back in, well, since we've been going, that they just, you know, they've gone on. But you know, I just like doing it because I like watching. It reminds me of time. I always say it when I play music, that a lot of the songs that I play, I always say it reminds me of a time when my back didn't hurt. You know, when I watch those race tapes, it probably reminds me of the time that made my back hurt or my head. But you know, I hope that I hope you'll continue watching, and I'll try to keep bringing them as long as I have them, as long as I keep finding a supply. I hope to one day have the whole, you know, if I can get all the tapes from the 90s on, and I'll put any of them on there. I don't care. You know, I don't care if it's, you know, I raced from 1990. I raced from 83 to 86 and then 90 to 98. You know, I'll put any of those on, and once they get past the, you know, we get to that, past that point, I like putting Lorraine tapes on. I like putting, you know, I don't care. I'll put a 7 tape on or from other tracks, you know, but I do them at my own pace. My wife sometimes works a second shift, and so, you know, I put race tapes on instead of practicing the banjo, which is what I should be doing, right? You know, I should be like, you know, I don't want to play like that for the rest of my life. I like playing a little something like that better. But I digress. You know, I hope you keep watching. I know, you know, it's hard to leave comments if you're watching on a TV, you know, so whether you like or whether you hit the like button aside, you know, I got a lot, you know, a lot of people have subscribed. That's cool because you know when they first come out, you know. But I usually will post them right to Facebook the next day or whenever I can get to it. You know, I don't care about them. You know, it's nice to hear comments. You know, it's nice to see a comment and see the likes. Funny, you get some of the short videos, the intersection hits were like, you know, you get like 2,500 views and 12 likes, which is cool. I don't care. I like them, so that's really all that matters to me. But I do appreciate when, and I know there's a lot of you when I see it. If I see it, at the Walmart or the Farm and Fleet or something, you know, and you're like, hey, and, you know, I may not place you because if you're younger than me, you are probably a little kid. And, you know, one day I was at the gas station, and I call him Uncle Jim, but it was Jim B's son, Josh, I think. You know, he was like, cowboy, and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't, you know, because he was a little kid when I was still racing, and I don't go down there that much because, you know, I don't want to have to buy another race car and blast Chad. But thanks again for watching, and I hope this wasn't too long and boring, but, you know, I do appreciate